the intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
Hey you, welcome back to the channel today. Talking about the Stella. And the reason I chose today to talk about the Stella is we actually have an Eclipse event going on right now. Go grind Eclipse hostiles, which is basic enough, but obviously this is going to be the primary thing that you're probably using. Now, you could use something else. And by the way, I'm not using this crew for it. I'm actually got my tier 4 Stella out there grinding it. I got my little baby Stella. Yes. Who else has 2 Stellas? Because having 2 Stellas is one of the few ships in the game that's actually a good strategy. I mean, it might not be able to cloak, and I don't know why lately, but this has been my favorite thing to do is to cloak my camera. But anyway, it might not be able to cloak, but it's still extremely useful, and I'll go over it. And I know for many of you who've been around a while, because this can affect new players, but we want to talk about efficiency of the Stella, when to go after things, when to upgrade it, when to scrap it. And even though this is typically DJ's baby, give him credit where it's due. DJ loves this thing, always has. The research tree, very, very time consuming to get through, but at the same time, very valuable, especially as you move into the later part of the game, 30s, 40s, 50s, you really want to have that research tree with a little bit of love. So let's start with the basics of the Stella, going into the faction tree itself. Now, remember, if you've not unlocked a Stella before, we talked about this in a video, something they updated here in the past year. If you've never unlocked a Stella, like you don't have one, if you go through your basic rep unlocking and go through your key grinding, the game will give you one in this faction tree. However, if you get a Stella from an event store, if you get a Stella by buying it, etc., the game no longer gives you the free one from the faction store. The only way to get the free one from the faction store is for it to be your first Stella. After that, it goes away. You have to go accrue your second one through event stores and or purchasing if you want one, but I do recommend 2. We'll talk about that when we get to scrapping. Let's talk about the actual rundown of this entire tree, which is a bit much, I'll admit. So you're going to have several layers and access, and I'll admit I don't really like how this tree is formatted in terms of how efficient it is to progress it, but you can see the different levels here. Now, I've not made it to even partner. I'm still a known associate. I don't put a ton of time into this, and I really should, but known associate is the 5th level, as you can see right here on the tree, with partner and outlaw being the final bits. Now, you'll see the directives you get. This is your Armada directives, your directives, rep, and credit. These are all you get for your turn-ins. So like if you go back to the main, where we've got it here, if you see, if I click on this, directives, rep, and credits, you see this is what it tells me I'm gonna get. And if you're curious what that translates to the picture that we were just looking at, put it back on the screen, that'd be right here. So this is what you're gonna get. 50, 67, and then for me, because of no associate, 130, and then 6480 rogue rep. As I said, the cost here, look, I'm spending 58,000 codes, which I can get pretty reasonably, but only getting double the rep I was getting one level below. I would like a little bit more rep because it grows so much. You know, you're going from 100,000, 500,000 to 2 million, 8 million. It does take a little bit of time there, but like I said, it's doable. You just got to make sure you're doing it every single day. So if you haven't already, make sure you're doing these turn-ins like I just did. Turn in my 58,000 keys and get my rogue rep, get my directives. And one of the good things about the Stella tree and the Stella format is that it does allow you to grind out rares and uncommons, and thus giving you a path to earn epics. It's a very good alliance event. So if you have an alliance that needs to do something as a community, this is something to really focus on because it's easy to get everybody involved once they reach that level 28 threshold. Back to the other things here on the list, because it's not just that you got to worry about. What's the cost of actually building and maxing out a Stella? And this is something we get asked about quite a bit. So here is your TCO, so total cost of ownership. To max out a Stella, you're going to need 256,000 uncommon uranium, 49,000 rare, and then 12,000 epic. That's to just continue to max it out, and then you're going to scrap it at that max until you've maxed out the research tree, which obviously I've not outlaw maxed, so I've got to still do that. But I have scrapped 2 max Stellas already, and getting, you know, a little bit less, you're going to need to max out several of them. You know, for those wondering how many, we'll go through that in another video, probably when we go more in depth on the scrapping process, because many of you are asking how many ships should I be scrapping and when. There's actually like basically a timetable you can build for yourself to be the most efficient scrapper you can be, but we'll cover that a little bit later. But this is the TCO. It's not that expensive as it may seem. You can actually get this pretty quickly. To bring back up on the chart, I want to show this real quick. Look at the far right. See the uranium, rares, epics, and the uncommons. So at Arbiter, you can start getting 2,600 uranium with 990 uncommon loot. So it's not terribly expensive. See, troublemaker, scoundrel, accomplice, known associate, how it goes down. Now, when we get into discussing when should we be scrapping the Stella to be most efficient, the honest answer, and I'll show you numbers in a minute, comes down to what are you able to accrue right now? Like what's available to you? So for example, if you are simply a troublemaker, then all you can scrap it is at tier 4. That's as high as you can take your Stella because you need rares at Scoundrel, start taking it there. But then once you reach Accomplice, you then get Epic. So there's this funny little range of where to scrap. We'll talk about it, but see, that is what matters. Now, one thing I do not really like is the growing cost in terms of what you have to spend as you level up to get these and then what you're getting in return. So you see at Troublemaker, I'm getting 5,000 for 1,200, but then if I go to Scoundrel, which, you know, I'm obviously past that, I've got to spend 2,500 to then only get 6,600. So I'm getting 1,000 more for double my cost. And that's something that annoys a lot of players who've gone through it. But at the same time, it is pretty easy if you're doing an active alliance group to run through these and get what you need. It's not terribly difficult. It's simply time consuming. It's one of the few trees that we have in the game that the time wall is not matched by also a paywall. Like how the new galaxy trees come out that we've complained about, even some of the new combat research, there's that mix of it. This one is just a time gate. You can progress through it and get everything that you need in the time allotted. You're simply going to have to do some grind. Now I want to talk about when should we scrap. That's something that we get asked as content creators basically every day, whether it's new players, old players. So I'm going to go to stfc.space real quick and talk about when we actually want to start scrapping various things. Now, the reason you may or may not agree is going to be time that it takes for you to complete what I'm about to do. So pop it on the screen. This is stfc.space. So tier 1, level 1, here we're gonna go over upgrade costs and then what you get for scrapping them. So as I said before, you really want to focus on what you can access. What I mean by that is what goos do you have? Because as I said, tier 4 is where you can get it with uncommon, and it's only going to cost you basically 10,000. That's not ridiculously expensive. If you compare that to the sheet that we had here, look at your sheet. How far can we get with 10,000? Well, if you're simply at Arbiter or even Troublemaker, that doesn't take you very long. I mean, you can actually pull that in a day. See, 4,000 uncommon loot. So you can get to a tier 4 very, very quickly. So one of the good things of the design of the Stella is early on, it does have an ease to start leveling it to where it feels useful. Now here's the drawback to a tier 4 scrap. You get almost nothing for scrapping it. So let's come down here. Tier 4 will be level 20. Scrap it. I'm only going to get 1,520 Stella particles. Now as a new player or a low level player, that's actually not that bad. That's fine. You can actually get some things done with that, but that's not what you're wanting, especially when you go just 5 levels higher here. We're going to 11,000. Here's the problem with that. That would mean a tier 5 Stella, but you're looking at 5,000. So here's the mix for me. Immediately you want to, as a new player, so if you're one of the newer servers, you're just now getting the Stella, you want to be scrapping it at tier 4 until you can unlock rare. Now, as we see on our master sheet here, remember, we can start accessing rare at Scoundrel. So once you hit Scoundrel, you can actually get to tier 5 in that same day. So on your first one, you get to tier 5 and scrap a tier 5 Stella because you can get it in that same day. But what I want to focus on is at the various goo levels. It's so weird to even say it like that, but at the various goo levels, you're going to want to scrap. So if you have access to rares, that's where we're going to start scrapping, where we want to take it as high as possible. And I'm curious, everybody agrees or disagrees with the strategy. But for me, if I can make it through the rare, which is starting at Scoundrel, now I want to take it as high as I can go. And remember, you don't get epics until Accomplice. So let's see where we can go from there. So if I can get rares, where do I want to go with that? Well, I'll actually show you. So I can actually go all the way to tier 7, and then 50,000 rares, 257,000 uncommon. Now, why would I want to go all the way to tier 7? Come back down to our scraps. This is what we had at tier 5, 11,000. This would be tier 6, 48,000. Tier 7, 131,000 particles. So you're talking 120,000 particles more for those 2 tiers. Yes, it's more time, but one thing about the Stella, the answer to the scrap question is as high as you can take it. It gets more efficient as you go up. So if you have access to rare, you want to really get to tier 7. Get it to that level 35 and then scrap it. Now, once you get it to the epics, it's actually not too expensive. If your alliance is going through the epics, 12,000. And here's where it gets really, really juicy. if you maxed it out at level 45, 467,000 Stella particles. Now, there's nothing wrong with scrapping at tier 4 if that's where you can go. Even tier 5 is not that bad. And one thing people look at is scrap time. Now, this comes down to why we talk about having 2 Stellas, 2 of them. Because scrap time is important. Scrap time is a pain point. So with that, if you go to max, which is 45, you see the scrap time, it's not that bad. 1 day. 40, 1 day. 35, 2 days. That's a weird, we're going in the wrong direction. But yeah, 30. So you still don't have massive scrap times, but still, as you're scrapping one, you can't speed them up. We still don't have that ability. So you want to have another able to go at the same time. So the scrapping is fine. That mechanic is not ridiculous, but you still want to have 2 ready to go. And what I do is I have 1 that I'm always maxing out and 2 that I'm using for grinding, or the second I'm using for grinding. Now, before I would just have 1 max it and then grind the second one up and scrap it. But basically I just run a flip-flop method. So if you remember the ships that I have out, I have a tier 7.5-ish one right now. By the end of the day, if I run 1 Eclipse Armada, I'll be able to upgrade this one to tier 8. So that will help me get a little bit closer to my next max. And see, I've only got the impulse engines with like, what, 86 left to go. Really cheap. Not that bad. So once I get that, I can then get it close to tier 9. I'll scrap it. And then right now I'm grinding with a tier 4 just so I can, have it going. But I've got 2 because I always really want to have 1 scrapping. When I don't have 1 scrapping, I want something else scrapping. That's kind of a theme in this game, is you always want to be scrapping something. Now, real quick, basic crews to go over. If you're hitting the Eclipse Hostiles, Pipe Moreau Chin or Picard Beverly Chin, it's going to be completely fine. Especially as you get deeper into the research tree. My M score is still relatively low compared to some players. My M score is 47, which is quite low for some. But once you get deeper into that tree, especially when you get to anywhere from 50 to 70, you can start soloing Eclipse Armadas. You can manage this with almost generic crews, but an early Stella crew is this with 5 Kirk Spock, very early crew. And then you can also start working in things like Riker once you no longer need the mitigation, because you'll start naturally having the mitigation that 5 gives you. You won't need her anymore because the Stella through Researcher goes so much stronger than Eclipse Hostiles. You'll be able to progress past that. So things to keep in mind, basics of when to scrap, when to go through your faction tree. Basically, you want to do this every day. You don't want to be like Rev and behind. And you also want to make sure you're pulling these every day because you're going to need Outlaw Research credits. So it is an important tree. This hopefully helps you be a little bit more efficient about it. I can't help the fact that it is grindy. I am going to go work on this today to get mine to tier 8. But I can tell you that you'll get a lot of benefit from this research tree. I know that the grind can be daunting. This is why that I didn't focus on a lot of it as an early level player in the 20s and 30s. But the Outlaw tree, as you get down it towards the end, where I really want to look at these efficiency researches, the 4-star, the repair researches, all of this is really good. Getaway Pilots 2 with the warp speed. I trust you, it comes in handy when you're trying to go to and from deep space. All of this is really useful. The ore researches, and you're going to want that. And then you got like Armada Invasion, which is just all Armada targets getting more mitigation stats versus. That's beneficial to all your ships. So you do want to get through this. You simply have to take the time, and we'll get some more Outlaw Research credits. I could have been doing this, even though it's not really a good one. The Apex Notoriety, by the way, is one that I have. But Prime Stella Cargo is a good one if you're talking about the primes. But yeah, anyway, that's it for the video. Prime Stella Efficiency, you definitely want to get this. If you scrap a ship at level 34, it's one of the best primes that you can get. This is definitely going to help you out. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helped out with your Stella progress. And if you have questions, as always, comment section down below. And if you do me a huge favor, like this video. It looks like this, and I will be happy to help you with anything that you got. Live long and prosper. Stay safe for the Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next one. And don't forget, Clear the Coast is up, but there's also for today a ticket event for combat for Eclipse. So you might as well do them both at the same time and get some extra looty loots. Look at that. We love some looty loots. We love some uncommons. Bye.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.